My name is Philippa Houghton-Chapman, and this is one of the ongoing series that we have from New Zealand Centre for Sustainable Cities and Whānau, the Housing and Health Research Program. And the idea of these is sort of town gown, that we talk about research that we're doing, and we're really delighted to see our friends and colleagues from Ministry of Housing Development here, and particularly the people that I'm going to introduce, who we've been working in partnership with decades now. So I'm going to introduce them all originally and at the beginning, and then pass over. Each of them will speak for 20 minutes, and then we'll have 20 minutes discussion. So the first person is Dr. Amber Logan, who's just finished a doctorate for which she got distinction on housing and health for Whānau Māori. And distinction is a very difficult thing to get at the University of Otago. She wanted to say that she's a mother of 5, and she has 5 very distinguished children too, and a registered psychologist with a broad health sector experience. She was raised by her kaumata at Waipatu in Hawke's Bay, next to the marae of the same name. Her early career was spent working as a psychologist in public health settings. This later expanded to include service and program development, research and evaluation, teaching and presenting to international forums on Indigenous issues. But the common interest that we have is a knowledge that housing is a real nexus of well-being, so this is what she's going to talk about. And then I'm going to pass over, the next person to speak will be Cheryl Davies. I don't know where Cheryl. Ko Ngāti Rokawa, Ngāti Wehiwehi, Ngāti Mutunga, o te whare kuri, kauru, Oko Iwi, has managed for over 20 years the Tukotahi Māori Asthma and Research Trust, which was the first Māori asthma society in New Zealand for over 30 years. And Sharon, we have worked on the effect of housing on respiratory conditions, and then much more broadly. And we've worked together for 23 years. And Cheryl just got one of the major awards at the Otago Research Centre, and got the wonderful cloak put around her the other day. Luckily before the fire engines came. Guy Perry, Ngāti Kahanunu ki Wairoa, is a geographer, scientist and engineer with an interest in human environmental systems. And he has worked in business in a variety of places like Niwa, where I first met him, and now he's a project manager and advisor. He's an engineer by training and has got a lot of expertise in renewable energy. He is on the board of Beacon Pathway. He leads the Māori Strand and the public housing and urban regeneration program that this research is all part of. So, and he's now working with the Wainui Mata Marae on their Papakainga development. So we're going to get a very rich feast here, and I'm going to pass over to, with not taking the time that I've spoken, to Amber here.
Thank you, Philippa. Kia ora koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Yeah, just forgive me a little bit. I'm still recovering from COVID, so I'm not quite 100%. It's a little slow walking here today, but you know, I think I'll get through. I'll be okay. I just sometimes I might stop for a bit of breath, but I'm good. Here we go. Yeah, kia ora koutou. It's really lovely to see so many people here. It's a little bit intimidating. Here we go. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about the research that I've been doing, and it was essentially in 2 parts. One part was about looking at the history of Māori housing, the development of Māori communities, and I used a case study. So I focused on what's now the Hawke's Bay area, particularly the Heretoma block, where I grew up. So that was a very special journey for me to be able to do that. So I'm going to talk a bit about the historical influences from Hawke's Bay, which was essentially a microcosm for what was happening around the rest of the country. You know, things developed in slightly different ways in different places, but you still had the same sort of macro influences that were going on. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to go into the outcomes of my research into Māori housing and health, and to, I guess, my main thing that I did, was to take features of housing and link them through to features that are, why is this feature a health promoting feature for Whānau Māori? And then link that right back into Te Ao Māori and use Te Ao Māori concepts to understand why that particular feature is a healthy thing. It's a bit new, it's a bit different, and hoping to fill a gap, I guess, in public health knowledge around how we perceive buildings, how we perceive homes, and how we perceive communities. This works. The artworks here, you'll see that the first one was Sandy Adset, a local artist from around the area where I'm from, and these installation pieces are from Chris Bryant, and a big shout out to those guys for me being able to use their work, and they're all quite meaningful for me. Just a bit on the background. We talk about this crisis in housing, this crisis in Māori housing, and this is not a new thing. The word crisis, we tend to think it's something acute, it's something that's happened recently. The crisis in Māori housing has been talked about for over 100 years, and that was my first big surprise in this research, and there was another one that I'll tell you about a bit later. But the surprise was that you can take newspaper articles from 1909, and if you modernise the language about Māori housing, about Māori housing problems, about housing quality, about iwi leaders and government and local government getting together to try and solve the problem, you won't know that it was written in 1909, you would think it was written this year. So the narrative actually hasn't changed. And I guess, around that, so if what we're doing has not actually solved the problems, what else could we do? How else could we be thinking about things? What ways can we think about new solutions? And what are the mistakes that we've been making that hasn't actually solved this problem that, frankly, has actually been leading to disability and death in Māori communities for well over 100 years? And if we don't have some new solutions, then our ability to promote that health, whānau, hapu, iwi being the basic social structures of the Māori people, then how do we do it? And so my work tackles that a little bit. It's not all the answers by any means, but it's an attempt to actually address this problem. So just a little map of, oh, hang on, I pressed the wrong button. Is it that one? Okay, no. Well, there's a map of Heratonga there that just shows you the historical area that I focused on, for those of you who aren't familiar. Waipatu, that's where I'm from. Waipatu Marae was 3 doors down. And this area was, it was an interesting area to do because we've got a big city right on top of our most precious taonga in the region, which was our fertile lands and our wetlands, which is mostly no longer there. By 1930, about 96% of Māori land was gone, and 70% of that went within 20 years of the very first land sale. That's great. Oh, okay. So those were my research questions. They were in the advertisement that went round, so you will have read those probably. I've just explained them, so I'll just jump on to the next. And listen, I just mentioned Chris Bryant's work here, installation work here. Those corrugated things are actually representative of the State House, and he was making an installation around Māori identity in the State Home. So if we look, and again, I'm aware that I've only got 20 minutes here, so if anybody wants to know more about this, please do come up to me later. So, what were the historical inferences on Māori housing quality? And essentially, there were influences that served to suppress housing quality, that served to decrease housing quality, and that served to destabilise the systems around housing quality. And what was really noticeable to me is if you take the political arguments from the late 1800s and some of the political arguments now, again, the narratives are the same. we're seeing the same sort of politicisation about housing. I think personally, when you politicise something that is essentially a basic human welfare, a human right to quality housing, you're sabotaging the future. It becomes very clear when you look through the history that when it becomes a political football, change becomes bogged down. There have been biases, who gets help and how they get help, who doesn't. So we have had a consistent bias towards people who have something, as opposed to people who don't have anything. And I don't mean to say that the people who maybe have received help from an intervention don't deserve it, don't need it. I'm absolutely not saying that. I don't want to put that sort of message out, but I am saying that, again, repeatedly over time, if you have something, you are more able to take advantage of a housing intervention that's been made. I mean, for example, there were nice Māori housing developments planned in the 1940s. We were going to have a new house, but you had to be able to get a loan. Well, the people who were worst off could not get a loan. And a consistent bias to the young, fit, male and employed. So those you were most likely to get a loan, so you could take advantage of these schemes. If you were part of the land development scheme, you could get some help with farming. Not overly successful when 96% of your land's gone, but still. But you had land, so you had something. And when you have intergenerational land loss and alienation, with the sort of interventions that have been happening over time, you become essentially less and less able to actually fit what has been decided as a good intervention. And Māori society, as we've seen, becomes more and more stratified, as the have-nots increasingly have nots, and the have-nots have not, if you like, over generations. Notions of the deserving and undeserving poor, that sort of Victorian notion of who we help and who we don't, and government inertia and just not taking responsibility. So there would be a lot of need on the ground. There were plenty of reports. It was not that nobody knew what was happening. It wasn't that it wasn't known that Māori were living in these terrible conditions and dying in these terrible conditions. There was starvations in the part. That was all very well known, but by the time the requests went up the chain, it started to be passed. Well, it's not my department, it's this other department over here, and I think it's somebody else's responsibility, and then the excuses for not doing anything. So as I mentioned, we've had inadequate interventions, an inadequacy of power sharing and funding mechanisms. It's very obvious. Government policy was at first destructive until the early 1900s, and then it became, if you like, inadequate rather than destructive, mostly. But you would see these funding mechanisms where Māori might be given some semi-autonomy, village committees, Māori health committees and things like that, but expected to fund a lot of that from raising taxes from the very people that they were actually trying to help. And when you're poor and you don't have anything, how much tax are you going to be paying to the health authority to do something? It was bizarre. And too little, too late. The historian T.J. Hearn mentioned that it was too little precisely because it was too late. Failing to act when the problems first appear, knowing that the problem is getting worse, but doing nothing until it's really bad, and then doing what you probably should have done 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 50 years ago. But by then, it's too late, you need to do more. And I've got this last one, a failure to distinguish a house from a home, or a housing from a community. And I mean that the home in the broadest sense. And if we think about it, are we building houses or homes? Homes being meaning for people. We're talking new developments and new suburbs, or we're building communities. Because when you think that you're developing homes, when you think that you're developing communities, you develop things in a different way than if you do, if you're just thinking about, I'm putting up a new housing development over here. And there's a very distinct difference on that. And a little point I'd like to make here. The notion of righting the wrongs of the past can only ever be a partial solution if the wrongs of the present are ignored. And by that I mean that these influences are actually still there. We still have barriers for people accessing interventions. We still have the politicisation of this basic human right. It's still going on. It's not something that happened in 1800 and ended in 1920 or something like that. It's still happening today. The same bureaucracy is happening today, and the same alienation within Māori communities is happening right now. Oh, yes. Oh, 5 minutes. Ooh, okay. Jumping on through. And there were some, I'll zip, wait till I get to, I'll go a little bit faster. So there were some positive influences that I found, and you'll be familiar with these and you won't be surprised. Retention of land, community, whakapapa, connection, identity, tūpuna stories, collective memories. Those are all the things that have been positive influences for housing quality. And I wish I could tell you about all of the wonderful stuff that Māori did to hold on to what they had, and to try and gain it back. But it'll be another talk. So we'll get into what I developed really as what I called a Te Ao Māori theory of housing. And within this, I was asking the questions of what is wellness, what is a wellness promoting home, what is a wellness promoting community, and linking as I mentioned earlier, linking the features of a building and also the features of a community into a set of wellness principles. So this came completely from the people I interviewed, and Kaumātua and Kuya and others in the community. I didn't lead anything on this. So whatever the feature that someone told me was important, that was important. So I didn't ask about layout, and I didn't ask about building materials. That all just came out. So I've got some examples here. There's a little example. I've got 3. If we look down the side, they've got item layout. So your features of layout, 3 types of spaces: a private workspace, a communal space, and interestingly, there's a resting space. And the private space and the resting space were two different places. And if we take them through, whānau water factor, why, what do these things do? We have an action of aroha and manaaki when you have that communal space. And if you don't have a communal space like that, you are not able to exercise those values, and you're not able to respect the mana of your guests. You're not able to build that wellness in your home if you are limited or you are stopped from doing that. Vitality. We've got resilience, seeking wellness, and those kind of, you can sort of see as it goes across in layout, how layout actually pans out into ideas like agency and wellness promotion. Past it here. The other one I chose here is iconography, which I thought was it was a very interesting one for me. So this is representations of tūpuna, and a young man I interviewed said to me, well, you know what a healthy home is? It's when you see photographs on the walls and not holes. And I thought, what an amazing and insightful quote that is. And I talked quite in depth about people, what that meant to them to have photographs on the walls. And that's something about a home that makes a home, that gives people the advantage and the opportunity to have that ancestral link, to have that sense of identity, to have also that sense of hope, a sense of connection. Just the act of having your grandfather's something, your grandfather's spade, having your photo of your nanny on the wall, and what a real and meaningful difference that makes for people. Quickly again. Okay. Briefly, I also looked at a wellness promoting community. The thing I'd point out there is there's a difference between, about how we think where a home stops and where a community starts. There's quite a lot of interesting data around that. Essentially, they both projected into each other. Natural green spaces, activity areas. So if you've got an activity area, multi-generational, different generations can use it at once, although they're not doing the same thing. And intergenerational, they're all doing the same thing at the same time. And the fantastic opportunities that has for identity building, for intergenerational knowledge transmission, for resilience building, by having those things in the community. A meeting place was important, so the devolving of political power, so that people felt politically involved in local government if they had a meeting space that would facilitate that. Oh, 2 minutes. Cool. And of course, accessible and affordable public transport. People wanted to be able to get to important places. I'll just briefly look at this. I'll pick something out here. So what would a community garden be doing if we want to look at it from a whānau order promoting aspect? So we have aspects of kaitiakitanga, caring for the environment, matatau, knowledge and skill building, connection to self, connection to the environment, intergenerational knowledge transmission, vitality through activity, all these things. And we tend to talk about them. It's good to have fresh vegetables and it's good to have some fresh air. So the difference here is, well, this is a Whānau Māori way of looking and understanding and even planning these kind of things. And then you've got your wellness that comes on the side. Last slide. Here we go. And this is a quote that I've always loved. It's sometimes misquoted as Doi, because it was actually Cooper et al. To ask who are the Māori people is to ask about the history and traditions, the language, customs, songs and rituals of the Māori people. The feeling of identity and commitment to Māori things is a result of all these threads which interrelate to form a way of life, a Māori way of life. Our traditions and myths are not just stories or fantastic events cast in the mists of time. They are meaningful and real in the sense that they validate our existence, order our chaos, and help guide our destiny. And that was something I thought about a lot when I was doing this work, because I could see how a whānau order promoting home and a whānau order promoting community fitted so well with this quote. And I guess my last comment on that, I mean, you've got, in Te Ao Māori, you have this ever-creating universe, and within the ever-creating universe, you have the ever-creating person, and the ever-creating person becomes enveloped in an ever-creating home. So we're not talking about a home as being just a collection of materials or fixed in time and space. And we talked about taonga being in the home, about a connection to land and place. And so you've got the past and the present and the future sort of brought together in a single relational point, like a portal to those things that are just so dear to you and so important to you and to which you are connected. So thinking about Cooper's comment on Māori identity, that is Māori where our language, our customs, our songs and rituals, and I'm going to add something to that. So I'm going to add that we are our land, our people and our homes. Thank you.
Kia ora no tātou, ka nui te mihi kia koutou I tēnei wā. Today, both Guy and I would like to share our journey with Whānau Māori and the establishment of a papakainga on this land surrounding the marae. So Whānau Māori is a large urban marae based in the heart of Waitemata. The marae was built in the early 1970s and it was built by the Waitemata community, so the community played a big part in in the establishment of the marae back in the 70s. We're also a member of a large Whānau Māori collective comprising 8 Māori health and social service providers. Sorry. So Wānau Māori is located in the heart of the community, so it's really central within walking distance to many of the schools, the shops and the health centre. It's a beautiful community. It's surrounded on 3 sides by bush-clad hills, and in this photo here, Wānau Māori is pretty much in the centre of where this photo is. Yeah, thank you. So we're really fortunate. We're one of the only marae in the Hutt Valley that has land surrounding it. One of the challenges, we've had many challenges over the past 10 years, but one of the recent challenges we found was that our land is designated as recreational land, which means we can't build housing. So there's been lots of little ups and downs along the way that we've had to deal with, and this is one. But we think we've found a way where we can continue on with building our homes. These photos just show our beautiful wharenui puki atua. The black and white photo was taken in the 80s, shortly after the establishment or building of our wharenui. In the top corner, the marae is really active. We have many activities that occur there, and one of the programs that we've run for over a decade now has been the releasing of kiwi in the bush surrounding Wānau. So the kiwis are all blessed and named at Wānau Marae, and that's sort of that, just that relationship with te taiao, with our environment, has been an important part of the work that we do at the marae. Our values are very important to us. They guide the way that we care and interact with our community, with our whānau. So with any project we undertake, our values play an integral part in any of our decision making and implementation. Special consideration is given to te taiao, as I said earlier, our environment, te ao Māori, our culture, the community and people, and we celebrate innovation, even though sometimes it can create some headaches. So our project is called He Tipu Manahau, and it's been I always say it's a journey. It's been a huge journey for us, and it's been one that I'd like to acknowledge Philippa Howden Chapman for. She's pretty well much been with me on this journey for the past decade. It really has been a labour of love for Wānau Marae. So our vision has never changed, and taking into account our values, we have always had the outcome being that we are able to provide affordable, high quality, low cost rental housing for our whānau. We want to be innovative. We know that just providing housing is not the only answer. We want to ensure that we address things like fuel poverty. We want to have wraparound support services that can come in and also provide, wraparound whānau order support. So linking in with providers, our local Māori health providers, has been really important to this project, and has probably been a key focus for us is housing. It's very similar to what Amber said. We want to build homes. We don't want to build another community within a community. We want this to be a very inclusive part of the Wānau community. So we really have worked alongside our local community throughout the 10 years. It's been a long time, a long journey, but we try and keep everyone updated at all stages. As I said, this has been at times a complex and often frustrating project. It involves a multitude of people, sectors, government agencies and other industries. We do feel there's a genuine commitment from all of the stakeholders involved in this project to provide healthy, secure and affordable homes. But my gosh, they have such tedious processes often that can take many years to work your way through. We always thought we would, for a country who talks about a housing crisis, that it wouldn't be so hard for us to build homes for our whānau. We have the land, but it has been at times a really difficult process to be able to even begin to look at the next phase, which is what Guy will talk about, the exciting phase, the master planning. So just acknowledging the journey that we've had. This photo probably highlights some of our journey. I think the first two photos, we didn't have morning tea, and in the third photo it was looking a bit more promising, so we had scones, so yeah. And I'd just like to hand over to my colleague, to Guy Penny, and he will just talk through some of the exciting parts of this journey, looking at our master planning. So, kia ora.
E rau rangatira, e nā hawi whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I've had the privilege of working with Cheryl and the other trustees at the Whānau Māori for about the last 4 years to try to help project manage essentially their vision and bring it to a reality. And as Cheryl says, there's lots of moving parts, so I guess my role has been to try and coordinate these moving parts and put some energy into the project a little bit and try and push things forward. Just over the next few minutes, I'll just talk to you about sort of where we're at now, and this is after my involvement's been 4 years, but Cheryl and others have been working for much longer. So we've been through recently, in the last 2 months, a series of master planning workshops with Kāinga Ora. And this is the site, and sort of picking up on some of the things Amber said and our understanding of Māori wellbeing and housing and communities. This master planning session is that it's about creating a community and not just a whole lot of houses on a site. But we've had to figure out where the main elements go. It's kind of, we're working with Kāinga Ora and they need to go through this process, and we wanted to as well. So some of the key things that we've had to do, the kohanga reo that is positioned down here, that currently is right in the middle of the site. So they wanted to expand, and the role is growing, so there just isn't enough room there. So we've had to suggest they move. I'll talk about the detail a little bit, but one of the things that is really important to us is making connections within the site. Okay, so the residents have connections with each other. There are spaces for them to interact with each other and create relationships with the local te taiao. we also wanted to make wider connections with the community. So the road coming in at the top, a lot of people walk through this site at the moment. You saw that aerial photo, it's just green field. So people walk through this site, and we wanted to retain that ability. We don't want to keep people out. We want to give them the opportunity to walk through and make connections and see what's going on here. So the pathways through are important. And just the arrangement of these elements, those houses on the top right, with the number 2 on them, they're future kaumātua housing, and the other houses are going to be built by Kāinga Ora. The key thing for us is creating these connections and the opportunity for interaction. So that's where we've landed with our master planning sessions with Kāinga Ora, and a company called Logan, who are from Wellington, they're landscape architects, were involved in that, and they were really, really good. So shout out to Mark Newdick from Logan. He was really important to have someone with his skill guide us through this. Next one. So this is this is a bit more of a focus on the actual site. So I'll give you some of the details. We've got 12 dwellings. So, you know, it's not a massive project, but it's something that the Whānau Māori can do that aligns with their values about serving the community and housing. There's a need for housing in Whānau Māori, and they had land, and so they've decided to create housing. And so there are 12 houses of different typology. Some will be accessible. Kāinga Ora are going to build the houses. They're going to put up the capital, and they're going to build the houses. They're going to manage the houses and the tenancies as public housing for 30 years, after which point they will hand over the houses to the marae at no cost. So to get to that point took many years of negotiation. It sounds simple, but it's taken quite a long time. What else can I say here? There's the infrastructure as well. So this is a greenfield site essentially. So we need infrastructure. So the Puna Kōkiri are involved in that, but we haven't had that confirmed from them yet. So there's still a hiccup there, and a possible hiccup. And what else can we say about this? You see the different, the middle area, we wanted to have a central area where people are common, where people can gather, and we wanted the road to be kept out of the development. We couldn't keep it out completely because of various planning rules and things. You need access for emergency vehicles and those sorts of things. So we've pushed the road to the northern boundary. I mean, this is about the 4th or 5th version of this master plan. We had the road in very different places, and we had the housing down here. We've tried different things, but really we wanted to keep vehicles off the site. We don't want any fencing, so that sort of contradicts Kāinga Ora's standards. We want the front of the houses to be facing into the marae, even though the access to the houses is from the road. We also want to have the bedrooms on the northern side of the houses. Kāinga Ora have a sort of principle where they put the living room on the northern side. We want the bedrooms on the northern side. So we're going to get into the architecture part of it in the next few weeks. What else? Yeah, one of the things it's rightful about when we started this, we had developed a solar PV microgrid system that was fully designed, and that was going to be placed on the wharekai roof. It was going to be something in the order of 100 kilowatt hours, so quite large. there was going to be a microgrid. It was going to be just one grid connection, so we're trying to reduce the costs in terms of connections to the grid. And it would have a battery as well. So the idea is to generate power that could be supplied to the Kāinga Ora houses and also to the marae. There was a lot of difficulty working with Kāinga Ora around that, around ownership, who would own the equipment, who would manage it, what do you do if someone doesn't pay their bill, how do you set up a billing system in a community, all those issues that come with these sort of microgrids. And in the end, it got too hard for Kāinga Ora and they pulled out. So we lost, it was funded as well, so we lost the funding and we lost the opportunity for that. But we are progressing ourselves with our own smaller version of a microgrid for the marae, and we've kept the option open that we can supply to the houses if Kāinga Ora want it. Next one, please. So I think the next slide is just sort of some of the things I've mentioned already. Yeah, some of the details. Let's move on to the next one, because I know time is short. So yeah, this is what this is where we're up to now. So one of the things that we haven't really talked about is that because it's a Māori reservation, A, when we started you couldn't build houses on it, and B, if you did build houses you couldn't lease them for more than 7 years. So Kāinga Ora needed 30 years. They needed a ground lease for 30 years. And Kāinga Ora have not done that before. They do have leased properties, but they don't lease land and build their own houses on that land. So we had to go to the Māori Land Court to get an exemption to extend the lease for the period that Kāinga Ora wanted. In order to go to the Māori Land Court, I don't know if people have been through that process, you've got to have all your documentation correct. You've got to have all your lease agreements, your MOUs. There's a whole bunch of, a draft agreement to lease. There's lots of things you need. And so you've got to go through those negotiations with all the parties in advance to create those documents. And you need lawyers. So you need a lawyer, you need money. So where do we get money for a lawyer to just go to the Māori Land Court? That's why it's taken us so long, because we have to apply for funding, for a resource, to go through this process. But in the end, with a lot of support from our relationships from Philippa and others, we did go to the Māori Land Court and they gave us an exemption. It was pretty much a no-brainer from their point of view. There's a housing crisis, there's some land, someone wants to build houses, why stop them based on this legal thing around a lease? So they approved that, and then that opened up Kāinga Ora to invest in master planning. So we couldn't do any master planning or any architectural work until Kāinga Ora was satisfied that the project was legally able to be, moved forward. So we completed the master planning just very recently, just about a month ago, and that's what I'd shown you earlier. And now we're moving into the architectural space. So we're looking at the actual design of the houses, some of the features that Amber mentioned, they're top of mind for us, the type of spaces that we want. We're looking at this, we're looking at them as a kāinga, as homes rather than houses. So they're an integrated set of buildings, and they have much more meaning than just the physical materials. We want to have, one of the things we did before we did the master planning is the Whānau Māori trustees and others were involved in our own master planning session, and we looked for all the pūrākau, all the stories from the local area. What are the important events? What are the important people? What are the important taonga species? Whānau Māori, as the name suggests, was a wetland, and so that's why Sorry, if you can go to the next or last slide where there's an... Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, just one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to open up that waterway is culverted now. So it was a wetland, and along the top around the boundary is a pipe that basically takes the water out of the site. We wanted to express that on the site. We wanted to show people that this was a wetland and it's a natural feature, and so it's part of that connection with the environment and learning. This is where our water goes. Where does it go to after here? It goes into the local awa, into the harbour, so be careful about what you put in there. Those kind of connections. So yeah, that whole session that we did with the Whānau Māori trustees was really important to bring those stories forward, and along with our values, we need to bring them into this, the design of the houses and the site. I'll just go back to one other thing. That one there. Yeah. So just another thing that we're doing, because if you're going to have 12 houses and up to 40 people living right beside the marae, and it's going to deliver wraparound services and things like that. And we want the people from the houses to interact with the marae. It is an actual papakainga. There's always work to do on the marae, there's plenty of activities. And so you need the marae to be in a state, in a good condition. So alongside this process, we've been working on upgrading the marae, and there's a lot of work to do. And again, we don't have any money, so we've got to apply for funding. And so, we've got to replace the wharekai roof. That's getting up to $250,000 to do that because it leaks at the moment. The current heating system in the wharekai is a gas heater, and that is not only very expensive, it produces a lot of carbon emissions and a lot of moisture within the wharekai. So we want to get rid of that, replace with heat pumps. Again, it's quite a big process to go through all of that. All the windows are single glaze, some of them leak, so we need to replace those. The point is there's always work to do on the marae. It's a not-for-profit organisation, and so we're doing all of this on the smell of an oily rag and a lot of volunteers. Whereas the organisations we're working with, they have paid employees. So and we're in the middle of all of this with Hutt City Council, with TPK, with Kāinga Ora, and so forth. So it's not really a level playing field, but in the end, our decision to go with Kāinga Ora was because we needed the capital. And we've worked out a way forward, and in the end we're going to build houses that people who need houses can live in. That's really our aim, and to support them through the connections that they make in the community that we're developing. So yeah, I'll finish on that note. So thank you very much.